Hello and welcome to kind of an afterword to the Babby's First Bot series. I've collected a few groups of nodes and things that I've used to answer some questions on the Discord and stuff like that, and I thought I would just tag those into a video along with some extra little thoughts at the end. Um, First up, this is we didn't really do any deliberate focus fire with our bots in any of the nodes. Instead, we relied on selecting targets the same way with all of our bots and using that to cause bots to focus fire as opportunity presents itself. But if you want to make sure your bots focus fire, this is the node to do it, right here in the middle. Uh, this will make sure your bots always fire at the same targets. This is sometimes a good thing, this is sometimes not, but this is the simplest way to do that effect. And using these three attack nodes, your bots will try to stay at long range from your enemy, and they will always try to pressure vulnerable bots that are being attacked by allies. Uh, and again, this is sometimes a good idea, sometimes it's not. It's a strategic choice. Try it out for yourself, see if you like it or don't. It's entirely up to you. Down here, uh, this is how you detect bases in Domination. So if you use the question mark base, you get the team tags for neutral, ally, and enemy. So you can use this condition with various selections to determine what base you're going to go to instead of having to do multiple conditions with ally bases and enemy bases and neutral bases and stuff like that. Overall, pretty useful. We used it in our domination, but uh, we kind of did. We didn't use it as a condition. We used the question mark base for our movement node to move to neutral or enemy bases. But you can also add ally bases, whatever strikes your fancy. Next, we can check to see how bases are being done here. So what this checks is if an ally is in short range of a base and an enemy is not, or if myself is in short range and an enemy is not. Actually, I should cover this over here first. Um, so this is how you do an OR condition. If either of these conditions are true, do this. If both of these conditions are true, do this. And you can do a bunch of different conditions, and honestly, these ones are kind of redundant anyway. But this is how you would set them up. So if you want an OR, you put the two conditions side by side. If you want an AND, you put the two conditions vertically linked. But if you, so in order to check here, an important consideration here is that myself, the bot running the AI, is not an ally. So you have to be aware that if you're checking things like that, you have to check for myself and you have to check for allies. It's worth noting that if you check this, right, you can't make an OR out of this on a single node. If you do that, it'll try to make sure that it's me and an ally. So you have to do the OR here with two different conditions. And if an base is being attacked by an enemy, same thing. If an enemy is in short range of the base, we use the same condition here for both. And then I'm not at short range of it, and an ally is not at short range of it, then the enemy is capturing the base. Might be useful to you, might not. These are different kinds of retreat strategies. This is more or less what we used in our AI. And what this would do is just runs to the edge of long range. Just because a bot leaves range, we don't have to stop aiming at it. We can continue aiming at a bot that we started firing at, even though it's no longer in range anymore. It's sometimes helpful, sometimes not. But this particular retreat is vulnerable to that idea, because if the enemies are continuing to aim at us even after we run out of range, then they can still shoot us because we'll wiggle at that edge of long range. So this is the obvious upgrade. Move out of range, and if I'm being attacked still, it'll sleep. sleeping isn't overly helpful. You should basically never use this one. Instead, you should always use this one. This is called an out-of-range defense. So what it'll do is it'll move until it's out of range of all attackers. Then it'll start aiming at the nearest enemy. Now, because of how the geometry generally works out, there's a chance that your attackers are farther away than the nearest enemy. So if you do this retreat here, you might actually still shoot enemies. And if your enemy is chasing you, this can give you initiative because you'll move out, you'll start aiming, then they'll start aiming once they get back in range. That'll let you fire first. So that's a useful trick you can do. You might have to add some extra nodes for logic here and there, but this is a solid idea to learn how to do and learn how to use. Let's see, what else do we have? This is... I wouldn't use that. That's a range counter. You don't really need that. If you're trying to make your AIs behave the same in all modes, you can use this to detect modes. You can actually make it one node shorter, but I wanted to make Elimination 1, Domination 2, and Collection 3. You can actually just unlink that and test for 0 to be Elimination, but you could do either one, really. I just wanted to make this 1, 2, and 3 to be more concise and accurate, or to be more, not concise, but more logically consistent. That way we know and the way this works is because in Elimination there are no bases, and there are no resources, ever. And this will only run on the first turn. So we know that if there's a base, we're not in Elimination. So then we check to see if there's bases, because Collection and Domination both use bases. And so we set it to 2 if we find a base. And then we check for resources, and we set it to 3 if we find resources. The only risk you run if you do unlink this one and you check for 0 for Elimination is that if all of the resources get picked up, then you will, it might trick your AI into thinking that it's playing Domination when it's actually playing Collection. So that's a thing to be mindful of, but you can make your decisions based on these numbers later. You can check to see if the team counter is equal to, and then you can use any number you want, 1, 2, or 3 in this case. Let's see. These are all garbage. This is something you'll see a lot if you're on the Gladiabots Discord. People really like to talk about shot clocks, and shot clocks have a lot of utility, but a lot of people don't really know how to use them. So really quick, covering how this works. We've got our basic retreat nodes, we've got our target selection node, and our movement node. These are the same as we used in the campaigns. The only difference here is this node in the middle. It's a shot clock. I only set this up for the assault because I was trying to keep it clear and concise. And basically what happens here is on the first turn, or on every turn, it tries to set it to 0. But any of the square blocks, I think I mentioned it before, if any of the square blocks execute, then it will immediately cease any further execution. So if we think about how this approaches it, actually, I probably should have set one of these up, but so basically what happens is, as we aim at the target, counter 1 will increase. And while counter 1 is increasing, that's our aim time. It takes the assault 1.2 seconds for its firing sequence. And we can get that out of the setup. Not sure what I was messing with. But if we look in our setup, and we check the bot types, right? We can see the assault has 1 second aim, 0.2 second fire. So its entire cycle is 1.2 seconds. Shotgun is 1 second even, but you actually have to aim for 1 turn longer because the firing happens at the beginning of the turn, not the end. So if you're keeping the simple shot clock, it's it's still a 5-turn aim. The machine gun aims for 2 and fires over 7.425. So that's 37 ticks, because a tick happens every quarter second, and the tick is the same for every bot. The possibility of it changing exists, but right now they're all the same. And the sniper, 3-second, fires instantly. So like uh, the shotgun, you have to aim for 1 extra turn, giving the sniper a 13-second or a 13-tick firing cycle. So this is set up to use a 5-turn firing cycle. It increments every turn. If it's not already shooting at a target, say it doesn't have a target. It increases it to 1. Doesn't have a target, so it doesn't stop execution here. Then it sets it to 0. Picks a target if it finds one. Then the next cycle, it becomes 1. Tests here, continues firing. 2, tests here, continues firing. 3, tests here, continue firing. 4, tests here, continue firing. 5, it's no longer less than 5. This is the turn that it shoots, so it sets it to 0 and picks a new target. And so the advantage of a shot clock is that it allows you to switch to vulnerable targets and to switch to better targets without getting locked in. We saw some of our AIs when we were going through the campaign would stay tunnel visioned on an enemy when other enemies were better targets. I didn't really want to cover the shot clocks in the campaign tutorial, but I thought this would be a good place to mention them. And if you check the Gladiabots wiki, there's a shot clock challenge where people get millisecond precise shot clocks. And as long as you plug the shot clock in roughly the way this is done, you're pretty good to go. There might be some nuances, and you might have to experiment a little bit, but if you ask questions on the Discord, I'm sure somebody will help you. But that's about it for my little sandbox here. One other thing I did want to mention, the campaigns are subject to change. I don't know if I'm going to be updating these videos every time they do, but you'll notice the campaign AIs have an ELO range on them, and this is the rating of that AI. All of these AIs are actually pulled from multiplayer at the end of one of the seasons, and then they were plugged into the single player campaign for people to play against. And the bots that were selected match or were plus or minus a few rating from this ELO on a map that they did well on. So if you go through chapter 2 and you beat the final stage, it says ELO equivalent 1090. You will probably get above 1090 though, because that AI got to 1090 and you're better than it. But not only that, there's a lot of players who are still struggling to get their bots to behave the way that they would like them to because they're not accustomed to thinking the way the bots think. And so one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give to people is look at what your nodes are saying to do. Not what you want them to do, but what you're telling them to do. Because the bots will interpret them very literally, and sometimes that's not exactly what you're telling it to do. So even the best laid plans come falling apart once the bot learns how to misinterpret what you're trying to say, if that makes sense. So learning how to read the bot or read your AIs the way the bots do really does help. But more to the point, these chapters are subject to change. So if you're watching this video significantly after the upload dates, your AIs may be different to these. Your results may be different than these. I don't actually know. I have no way of reading the future. The chapter 2 should always be in this ELO range though, 1000 to 1090. And a lot of these strategies are real basic, real proven, long-term strategies. I made it sound when I was going through the chapters like, oh man, I don't know if this is gonna work. I knew if it was gonna work. I've beaten all of these chapters. I know what these do. So I tried to choose reliable, straightforward strategies that work really well, and you could easily translate your campaign bots from this series into multiplayer and start playing against other people. And I think you would be surprised how quickly and how reliably you climb for the first 20 or 30 games or so. It would not surprise me if most of these AIs would hover around the 1200 to 1300 range in their respective game modes. But that said, playing through the campaign as you go further up, you'll find different strategies more than anything else. The bots obviously have the same stats, and the the quality of the bots will go up, or like the quality of the AIs will go up. But more than anything else, you'll find old strategies, and sometimes old strategies work really well. Like in one of the collection maps, the enemy didn't even go for the resources, so we won 4-0. But that's because it was playing an old strategy. The old strategy was to fight for a few minutes in the beginning and then grab resources at the end. Now, my first time playing that campaign, it worked really well for me because my bots were too focused on fighting and not focused enough on grabbing the resources. These things can change. If the enemy bots didn't, or like if our collection respawns went away, then the enemy bots would have probably done very, very well because our bots would die and then they would have the numerical advantage they were looking for. So so that's one important thing to keep in mind, is that the campaign probably won't change quickly, but it is subject to change, and I have no way of looking into the future. But other than that, if you need any further help with anything else, go ahead and uh, contact go on the Discord. There's a channel called Questions. So if you have any questions about why is this doing this or how do I do this, you want to put them in there. And if you go to the strategies channel, that's where things like should I shoot at, or how do I go, like what's the best way to grab resources in collection, because that's not really a mechanical question, that's a strategic question. And you'll get on there, and I within a short time, not immediately because it's still a relatively small community, but you will get answers to your questions on the Discord if you ask them. But in the meantime, feel free to experiment. Uh, you can make backups of your AIs. I highly recommend doing that before you do any major reworks. Keep your old functional AIs, make a copy of all of the nodes in them, and then build a new one from a new AI, which you can do in the AI editor. This is the copy button, and when you do that, it'll prompt you to copy them. Highly recommended. But yeah, I guess thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed and have a good one.